It's hard to believe just how much gear Christoph Otto needs to hunt down a tiny pest.
Eradicating bedbugs is the Champions League of pest control. They're among the nastiest and most dangerous animals out there, and you have to think like a bedbug. Where would you hide? Where do they move? Where are the eggs? It's one of the toughest jobs in pest control.
Christoph Otto's job often requires some fairly large pieces of equipment. When a call from a customer comes in, he tries to prepare himself for anything he may encounter. His pest control vehicle is a regular car with no indication of his line of work. His clients appreciate the discretion so that it doesn't alarm the neighbors.
Bedbugs are making a real comeback. They were thought to have been eradicated, but they've made a massive return here in recent years.
And their resurgence is happening not just in urban environments, but increasingly in idyllic rural regions like here in southern Germany.
Bedbugs are just mean. They come out at night in the dark. You can't find where they're hiding. It all adds to why people are so afraid of them. They drink our blood like vampires. It's just awful.
Today, the pest controller is off to a youth hostel in Upper Bavaria. Pest controllers are often asked to enter discreetly through a back entrance, but hostel manager Mark Rochlus has decided to tackle the issue openly. And so begins the search for the needle in the haystack. Contrary to popular belief, bedbugs have nothing to do with poor hygiene.
We've not touched anything.
Great, everything can stay as is.
We had two people with bites that seemed to be from bedbugs. I immediately came up and said, "We don't know what's up with the room, but we have to vacate it now."
The faster the response to an infestation, the better. Tracking down these masters of stealth tends to be exceedingly difficult. In this case, some telltale signs did turn up.
Here's one that was crushed by some poor host. You can tell it's a bedbug from the shape of its body.
So the suspicions of the hostel manager are confirmed. The pest controller tries to determine the scale of the infestation.
That's the tricky thing about bedbugs. They've got thousands of options. It could be a tiny cranny, one you can't even fit your fingernail into, but they can squeeze in. They return hungry to their hideouts and await the next victim.
How long can they survive without a host?
There are studies that say they can live up to a year without feeding.
I thought starving them would be an option, that we just wouldn't use the room for 2 months.
Starving them won't work, unfortunately.
Although the infestation is still small, Mark Rochlus wants the room given a thorough treatment in order to prevent the problem from spreading. Back in the 20th century, these bugs the size of apple seeds were almost wiped out in many parts of the world through the use of DDT and other now banned insecticides. The pests developed a resistance to subsequent products. So now the blood-sucking insects are back. It's not just France and Germany. Britain is also facing a new bedbug plague. And here too, the problem is not just found in big cities. Entomologist Richard Naylor lives in Chepstow on the Welsh-English border. He spent the last 20 years studying bedbugs. His research lab includes an incubator with up to 50,000 specimens from a variety of strains. Naylor has a very special relationship to his bedbugs. This almost daily ritual certainly wouldn't be to everyone's taste. The researcher volunteers himself as host.
So bedbugs respond to carbon dioxide from our breath, and so in order to tell them it's feeding time, I breathe heavily into the pot, and they all wake up and realise that there's food about and become very active, start running around. So it's just telling the bedbugs it's time to feed.
And the permeable lids allow the bugs to do just that.
I use my own blood because it works the best. I've tried rabbit blood, chicken blood, sheep blood, pig blood, and whenever you use an artificial membrane system, you have to treat the blood with some kind of anticoagulant to stop it clotting, and that just doesn't seem to be very good for bedbugs. And so fresh blood is just the best. Is the best in terms of the numbers of eggs they produce and their overall health. Yeah.
But while he painstakingly ensures the well-being of his bedbugs, what about his own health?
I can feel a slight tingling sensation. I can't feel individual bites, but I can kind of feel it, maybe slightly itchy. But I've been doing it long enough I don't scratch anymore. I don't.
Bedbugs do not at least transmit diseases. Naylor allows them to feed on his arm and sometimes leg for his own experiments, as well as for research institutes and the pest control industry.
I noticed when I really feed lots, when we get big orders for thousands and thousands, I noticed that I was becoming anemic. I had a test for that. And so when it's like that, I take iron supplements to stop myself becoming anemic.
The recent surge in bedbug numbers means that business is booming for his lab. In the adjacent building, Alexia Naylor is busy getting an order ready as her husband arrives with the freshly fed insects. And how's his arm doing?
Not too bad. You can see my skin's a bit red. Yeah, it's a little bit red. It's not too swollen, and it'll go away in an hour or so. But it doesn't feel anything at all. It doesn't. It's not itchy or anything like that. It's a little bit warm, perhaps. Yeah.
I react a bit more than Richard does, but not too bad. So I've fed a couple of pots today, so you can just see that my arm's similar to Richard's. I only feed bedbugs as a last resort. I'm the kind of backup.
The couple are careful to check that potential buyers are trustworthy. After all, some could have dubious intentions.
Sometimes we are asked for maybe 200 bedbugs to a flat in New York or something, and there's no email or explanation for why they would need that. And so these ones we refund them, and we try and avoid those people. Yeah.
Bugs in various stages of life are transferred to these small vials, which are then sealed tight prior to packaging and sending. This order will be used to train canine bedbug hunters.
Detection dog teams will hide these around a bedroom, maybe in a hotel or in a hostel or something like that, and use that to train the dog to search for bedbugs. And then they'll offer that service to hotels, hostels, sheltered housing, all the places that really struggle with bedbugs. Yeah.
Hostels or five-star hotels, bedbugs aren't fussy about their lodgings. But these pests are particularly hard to control up in the mountains, which is why sniffer dogs are often brought in. Stefan Wellhausen is a sniffer dog handler. He's trained Derricks and Roma to track down bedbugs. Today he's come to meet Robert Kolbitsch and Michael Fraccaro from the German Alpine Club. They're headed up the Nebelhorn to inspect a mountain lodge where there was an incident of bedbugs last year. Robert Kolbitsch is in charge of lodges and hiking trails at the Alpine Club.
Bedbugs have been with us throughout human history and have become a growing problem recently. For years now, we've had lodge managers asking us to help them out of desperation.
The lodge is almost 2,000 meters up, near the summit of the Nebelhorn. Last year's infestation was discovered and dealt with quickly. The dozens of beds inside are now checked regularly by detection dogs.
This is a lodge that was completely enveloped in a tarp and then fumigated. That becomes the sole option if you just ignore the problem and the bedbugs are left to just keep on reproducing. The cost back then was between 50 and 70,000 euros. A huge amount of money.
Elaborate solutions like that are now a thing of the past. These days, the focus is on prevention and early detection, which is where Stefan Wellhausen and his trusty dogs come in.
All the rooms are open, so you can get started. Let me know if you need anything.
The dog-sensitive noses can sniff out the bedbugs. Unlike most hotels, the German Alpine Club takes a frank approach to the issue.
Without knowing all the lodges, I'd say that 10 to 15% have to deal with bedbug infestations. And if anything, it's getting worse. And the bugs don't come from the lodges. They're carried up here from the valley.
Sniffer dog teams are a blessing for the remote mountain lodges, ideal helpers in the fight to control bedbugs. Further east in Germany and on lower ground, Christoph Otto needs high-voltage electricity. He plans to use thermal technology to rid the youth hostel of its unwelcome visitors.
One of the most important parts of the thermal treatment is getting the room hermetically sealed. You have to be really vigilant because bedbugs are so clever. It's like a hunt.
Christoph Otto uses diatomaceous earth, a natural treatment made from the sharp-edged fossilized remains of microalgae.
It tears up their bodies and dries them out.
But the most important tool here is this hot air device. Bedbugs cannot survive in temperatures above 45 degrees Celsius.
Lights out, machine on, and then it's going to get toasty. It's now starting to heat up the room to the 55-degree target temperature and will run for 24 hours. Then, 3 to 5 centimeters into the wall, you have the fatal temperature of over 45 degrees.
Hostel manager Mark Rochlus is glad he chose the heat treatment option. It might involve a lot of work and extra cost, around 1,000 euros in this case, but it's considered very effective.
There was the risk of it spreading, of people taking them home, or of it getting worse in the building. So I'm happy that we opted for this course of action.
Bedbugs leave behind tiny dark stains. Spot those on your bedsheets and it's best to take a closer look. Back to the town of Chepstow in Britain and insect researcher Richard Naylor. He often spends the night in his sleep laboratory, where he carries out experiments using his own body. He uses a light-sensitive camera to capture what happens overnight. The vampires are already lying in wait. The researcher is fully committed to creating realistic conditions, even when it results in some discomfort. Do the insects behave as expected? This time, Naylor's testing a bedbug trap. As soon as the voluntary host is asleep and exhaling CO2, the bedbug sees the opportunity to feed. As expected, they bite his exposed skin, what's above the covers. But will the little bloodsuckers then fall for the pheromone trap? A time lapse from the infrared camera shows what happened through the night. At least the bugs do not appear to have disturbed his sleep. And the next morning?
When I first started sleeping in the beds, I was just like everybody else, a normal response of, every itch is something biting me, and I couldn't rest. And now that's completely gone. It doesn't bother me at all now. Yeah. Not the best.
Naylor is testing the appeal of an attractant cocktail with a view to developing a bed bug detector device.
Okay, I can see a whole bunch of bugs in there. I'll tap them out on the bed so you can see.
It's still in the test phase.
9, that's not bad. So that's nine bugs. 9 bugs in one night. Not bad at all.
A promising result. And Naylor is not the only one researching pheromone traps for early warning systems. All across Europe, there's growing demand for new methods of bed bug management. Last autumn saw a media storm following alarming reports out of France. For years, the bedbug problem there, as in many other countries, had been ignored and downplayed. But there's no denying the figures. A study for the French Agency for Food, Environmental and Occupational Health and Safety found 11% of French households had bedbug infestations from 2017 to 2022. The agency estimates the economic fallout for France to amount to 300 million euros per year. Reports of the situation being especially bad in Paris were hard to confirm, given the alleged involvement of Moscow-controlled social media accounts. Still, there was good reason to pay close attention to the French capital as host of the 2024 Summer Olympic Games. The issue of bedbugs was even addressed in Parliament. While many hotels struggle to confront the issue, one hotel in Montlhéry, a suburb of Paris, is taking an open approach. Rather than ignoring the problem, the hotel preempts visitors' concerns by using and advertising an early warning system. Swiss hotelier Max Malka has made the project a top priority. For him, it's clear.
France has 80 million tourists per year. They're the ones bringing the bedbugs.
Eager to spare his paying guests an unwanted surprise, he decided to go on the offensive. A friend told him about a startup in Cambridge, England, that developed an advanced monitoring system. After learning more, Malka became one of the system's first users.
This room has already been made today.
This isn't the first time he's shown off the setup.
This is where the system has been installed.
A discreet little box under the mattress.
The bedbugs are lured into the box. Once they're inside, the device takes a photo and sends it to the hotel manager and maintenance, along with the room number.
But first, that information is sent to the system's creators in Cambridge for evaluation. The team at Spotter keeps track of thousands of hotel rooms across Europe in order to ensure early detection of any bedbug infestation. The company says its accuracy rate is over 90%. A few months ago, the system registered a bedbug, enabling Max Malka to take immediate action. For him, the additional costs, 14 cents per night and room, have certainly paid off. In Switzerland, Zurich authorities have compiled records of bedbug cases for some 30 years, and the figures suggest an upward trend, albeit with a dip during the COVID-19 pandemic. And experts say the figures from Zurich could be roughly transferable to other European cities. Data in other cities is sparse due to bedbugs not being disease transmitters. Technically, they're considered nuisance pests and do not have to be reported. Opinion is divided over whether that's good or not.
I don't think reporting should be mandatory. I don't see any advantage from that.
Robert Kolbitsch from the German Alpine Club would welcome such a move. For years, he's been fighting against bedbugs in the country's mountain lodges. He would like to see greater transparency and more information in connection with the issue, including in the hospitality industry.
First, it would give us more precise figures on just how frequent infestations are. And second, it would force people to exchange information. That might make it easier to keep bedbugs under control.
The Alpine Club is under pressure. To date, the economic losses of infestations has amounted to a number in the high six-figure range. Kolbitsch has had a lot of convincing to do even within the association, although most parties now agree. His boss had a personal experience with bedbugs just last year. He had to call a doctor after a strong reaction to the bites.
The bite marks had a discharge and then swelled up. I had sleepless nights because I just couldn't lie still. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. Once we realized it was bedbugs, we instituted a plan of action. We bagged everything and put it in the freezer and vacuumed every nook and cranny every day. It's something you don't want in your home.
Together with the German Environment Agency in 2019, the Alpine Club published an informational brochure for visitors. Among their key consultants, biologist Alette van der Paan. She completed her doctoral thesis on bedbugs and now runs her own research laboratory.
You breed bedbugs?
Among other things, but not so many these days. We now get most of ours from Britain.
Van der Paan spent 10 years at the Environmental Agency, working on pest control methods. In 2020, she set up her own contract research company together with her colleague, Anne Mesig.
We test the effectiveness of insecticides for certification or the development of new products.
Her job frequently involves working with toxic substances. In this case, applying a contact insecticide to see how effective it is. Such tests are required by law for the approval of insecticides.
Tell me and I'll note them down.
This product is working as intended.
Males and females all dead in the second replicate too.
But resistance is becoming increasingly common with the insects no longer reacting to the toxins. The biologist is concerned about the future.
We're seeing this with most vermin and nuisance pests because they're being fought with insecticides that have similar active ingredients. We now have hardly any effective anti-bedbug agents on the market. In fact, just 2.
Female bedbugs are highly reproductive, and that's what makes an infestation so dangerous. It makes taking immediate action all the more important.
They can lay up to 250 eggs over their lifetime. The young hatch, and the females continue laying eggs. Once fertilized, they lay again and again, which means that reproduction is at a very high rate.
The females will stick their eggs to any suitable object, including the seams of suitcases. Offspring take 1 or 2 weeks to hatch. From there, they can continue to spread. The lab has received its latest order of bedbugs from Richard Naylor in Britain. Van der Pan is getting more and more of the insects via post. She's scaled back her own breeding program, which involves feeding the bedbugs with pig's blood via an artificial membrane. Her industry customers are willing to pay more for insects that have been produced under the most realistic conditions possible.
The customers feel it's a safer bet in terms of certification when we take bedbugs that have been fed on humans, like in real life.
Over in Chepstow, Richard Naylor's insects fed with his own blood are essentially the gold standard in the pest control industry. And what's more, his bedbug populations hail from a range of different decades.
We have lots of different populations of bedbugs. Some of them have been in culture for a very long time. This one here was collected in London, but it was something like 40, 45 years ago. And the same for this one from Germany. But then we've got populations that are more recently collected, and we do that because modern bedbugs are very resistant to insecticide, and so we want to know, we want realistic modern bedbugs when we're testing products, and so we have, as many populations as we can get. I rely on friends and pest controllers sending me samples whenever I get the chance.
Naylor now has customers all over the world. Over the years, he's become more and more reflective on his area of expertise.
The longer I've worked on them, the more interested I've become. I think it's amazing that an insect can make a comeback at a time when humans are wiping out species faster than ever before, and they can do it in our beds. You know, I have respect for them or something. In awe of an insect that can make a comeback like that.
Back in Bavaria, pest controller Christoph Otto is paying a follow-up visit to the youth hostel. His heat treatment system has been up and running for over 24 hours in the room infested with bedbugs.
3 centimeters into the wall, we've reached a temperature of about 48 degrees. It worked great.
It's steamy in here. I thought it'd be drier.
Of course, we now have condensation from the water at the coolest spot. The air will now circulate rather quickly, but the room will remain warm for a few more hours. The best bit is seeing the dead insects.
Can we be sure the temperature was high enough everywhere?
Yes, it was over 45 degrees everywhere, over many hours. That will have worked.
Mission accomplished.
You see everything from 5-star hotels to vacation apartments, youth hostels and people's private homes. And with how things have developed over the last 2 years, I can see it becoming an even more serious problem.
Big business for pest controllers, bad news for travellers.